The Little Mermaid. Far out in the deep ocean, where the water is as blue as the sky and as clear as crystal, there lived the Sea King and his 6 daughters. He lived in a beautiful castle with walls made of coral, windows of amber, and a roof of shells that opened and closed as the water flowed through them. Inside each shell was a glittering pearl. The castle was surrounded by a garden of lovely, colourful sea plants and flowers, and was filled with fish both large and small. The Sea King's wife had died many years ago, so his aging mother kept the house for him. She was very old and wise and looked after the sea princesses. The Sea King's youngest daughter was the most beautiful of all, with skin as delicate as a rose petal and eyes as blue as the sea. Like all sea people, she had no legs, and her body ended in a fish's tail. All day the princesses played in the hall of the castle or swam in the gardens. Each of the princesses had their own little garden in the castle grounds where they could dig and plant whatever they wished. One had a flower bed in the shape of a whale. Another made hers like a shell. But the youngest princess's garden was shaped like the sun, which could be seen in the calm weather, shining down like a great flower. Her garden was full of red and yellow flowers, like the rays of the sun at dusk. The only thing the youngest daughter cared for more than her pretty flowers was a beautiful marble statue of a handsome boy. It was carved out of pure white stone and had fallen to the bottom of the sea from a wrecked ship. She loved to hear stories of the world above the sea. Her grandmother would tell her about ships, towns, people, and animals. "When you turn 15, said her grandmother, you will be allowed to swim to the surface, to sit on rocks, and to see the great ships, the forests, and the towns." When the oldest sister turned 15, she swam to the surface to see the world above. When she returned, she told her younger sisters such wonderful tales. She told them of moonlight on a sandbank, the twinkling lights of a town, the sound of music and voices, and the ringing of the church bells. The youngest sister longed to see these wonderful things. As the years passed, each sister turned 15 and was allowed to swim to the surface to see the world above. The second sister returned with tales of the sunset, the sky golden with red clouds scurrying across it, and a flock of wild swans flying towards the sun. The third sister was the bravest and swam up a wild river. She saw green hills, palaces and castles, forests and birds. She came across little children playing in the river and wanted to join them, but the little black animal came and barked at her, so she swam away. It was a dog, but she'd never seen one before. The fourth sister stayed in the ocean, but saw great ships as large as castles, their sails white as the sun. She swam with leaping dolphins and saw huge whales spurting water into the air. The fifth sister's birthday was in winter. When she swam to the surface, she saw enormous icebergs like huge glittering pearls. She sat on an iceberg and watched a storm with dark clouds, rolling thunder, and blue lightning darting across the sky. Once they had turned 15, the older sisters could swim to the surface whenever they wished. But after a few months, they decided they preferred to stay at home. However, in evenings, the 5 older sisters would swim together to the surface and sing to the sailors on ships about the delights of the ocean. But the sailors never understood, thinking it was just the wind. Finally, the youngest sister turned 15. She bade farewell to her grandmother and swam to the surface. The sun was just setting as she raised her head above the waves, and the sky was crimson and gold. A large ship with 3 masts sat in the water. It was stuck where it sat, for there was no breeze at all, and the sailors were making merry on the deck. Music was playing, and the ship was lit up with lanterns. The mermaid swam closer to the ship and looked in the cabin windows. She saw a number of finely dressed people inside. Among them was a handsome young prince. It was his 16th birthday, and everyone on the ship was celebrating. The young prince went up to the deck, and suddenly hundreds of rockets rose into the air. The little mermaid was amazed as she watched the fireworks exploding and falling like stars. How handsome the prince looked as he watched the fireworks. As time passed, the sailors put out the lanterns, but still the little mermaid watched. The sea started to become restless, and the waves grew higher. The wind rose. The sailors unfurled the sails, and the ship continued on its way. But still the little mermaid followed. Soon, dark clouds were racing across the sky, and a terrible storm approached. The waves rose higher and higher. Soon, the mast groaned and then snapped off. Some of the planks of the ship came loose. The little mermaid could see the sailors holding on with all their might, but she could not see the handsome prince. Suddenly, a flash of lightning crashed across the sky, and the little mermaid saw him struggling in the water. As the prince sunk down, she swam to him. His eyes were closed, and he was not moving. She helped him to the surface and kept his head above the water until morning. As the sun rose and the storm passed, there was no sign of the ship. They were in sight of land, and so the little mermaid took the prince to shore. There were green hills in the distance, and a large white building like a church or convent. The little mermaid laid the unconscious prince in the sand. Then a bell rang in the distance, and some young girls came out of the white building. The little mermaid swam out to sea and hid behind some rocks. One young girl walked to the beach, where she found the prince lying in the sand. The prince came to and smiled at the girl, and then many people came to help him. But the prince had no smile for the little mermaid, as he did not know she had rescued him. The little mermaid was very unhappy as the prince was led away into the white building. She returned home to the Sea King's castle. After this, the little mermaid was always quiet and sad. She often swam to the beach where she had left the prince, but she never saw him. Her only comfort was to sit in her garden, but she let the flowers grow wild, and it became very dark and gloomy. At last she asked her sisters, and they showed her where the prince's palace was. The little mermaid spent many days and nights in the sea near the palace, watching him. She saw him sailing his boat or walking on the shore. As she watched, she also saw other people and heard fishermen talking. She grew more and more fond of humans. Finally, she went to her grandmother and asked, "Do humans live forever?" "No," replied her grandmother. "They must die and do not live as long as we do. But when we die, we become the foam on the surface of the ocean and have no immortal souls. Humans have a soul that lives forever, even after they die." "So I will die and never hear the music of the waves or see the red sun. Is there nothing I can do to gain an immortal soul?" asked the little mermaid. "Only if a man were to love you so much that you meant everything to him, and he promised to be true to you alone," replied her grandmother. "But this could never happen, for we cannot walk among them. Be happy and swim in the ocean." The little mermaid was not content. She decided to visit the sea witch. She travelled past foaming whirlpools and bubbling mud. The sea witch's house lay in the middle of a strange forest full of plants with slimy branches like worms. The sea witch's house was made of bones and was surrounded by fat water snakes. "I know what you want," the sea witch said when she saw the little mermaid. "You are very silly. You will get what you wish, but it will bring you nothing but sadness. You want legs like a human, so the prince will fall in love with you and give you an immortal soul." The little mermaid nodded. The sea witch laughed and said, "Ha ha ha! I will make you a potion. Swim to the shore before sunrise and drink it. Your tail will be replaced by legs, but every step will feel like you are standing on sharp knives. You can never be a mermaid again, nor return to your home and family. And if the prince does not love you and marries another, you will become the foam on the waves. If you can bear that, I will help you." "I can bear it," said the little mermaid. "I must be paid," said the sea witch. "You have the sweetest voice of all the creatures in the sea. You must give it to me." The little mermaid was sad, but she agreed. The witch prepared the potion and took the little mermaid's voice. The little mermaid returned home, where everyone was asleep. She took a flower from each of her sisters' gardens to remember them, and then swam away for the last time. She swam to the shore and drank the potion, then swooned. The next thing she knew, the sun was up, and the handsome prince was standing before her. She realized that instead of her fishtail, she had legs. The prince asked where she was from, but she could not answer. She had no voice. The prince took her back to his castle. Every step felt as though she was walking on needles, but she walked gracefully. They dressed her in robes of silk, and she was the most beautiful woman in the palace, but she could not speak. The prince was charmed by her beauty and said she should stay with him always. She accompanied him everywhere he went. As the days passed, she loved the prince more and more, and he loved her as he would love a child. But he never thought to marry her. "You are dear to me," the prince told her, "but there is only one woman in the world I could love. I was shipwrecked, and the waves cast me to the shore near a church. A young woman found me there and saved my life. She serves the church still." "He doesn't know it was me who saved him," thought the little mermaid. "I was the one who carried him to shore, and I saw the pretty maid he loves more than me. But he shan't marry her, as she serves the church." It was decided by the king and queen that the prince should marry. The daughter of a nearby king was to be his wife, so the little mermaid went on a ship with the prince and his court to visit them. "I must visit her," said the prince to the little mermaid, "but they cannot force me to love her or marry her." One night the ship was sailing. The little mermaid sat on the deck looking at the waves. She thought she could see her father's castle in the waters below. Then her sisters came to the surface and waved to her. She beckoned to them, but a cabin boy came by, and so they dived down. The next morning, the ship sailed into the beautiful harbour of the king. There was a big parade waiting to meet them. The princess had not yet arrived, as she was being educated in the church to learn the royal virtues. At last she arrived, and the little mermaid had to admit she was the most beautiful woman she'd ever seen. She was fair, with laughing blue eyes that shone with truth and purity. When he saw her, the prince let out a cry and exclaimed, "It was you who saved me when I lay shipwrecked on the beach. Oh, I am too happy. All my dreams have come true." He took the princess in his arms. The little mermaid felt as though her heart was breaking. She knew that when he married, she would change into the foam of the waves by the next morning and would never have an immortal soul. That night, the prince was married, but the little mermaid only thought of the death that was coming to her. She was dressed in beautiful silks, and she danced more gracefully than she ever had danced before. Even though it hurt her tender feet, she did not feel it, because the pain in her heart was much greater. The prince took his bride to the ship, where the celebrations continued into the night. Then the ship grew quiet as everyone fell asleep. The little mermaid leaned against the edge of the ship and looked towards the east, where the emerging sun would signal her end. She saw her sisters rising out of the water, but their beautiful long hair had been cut off. "We have given our hair to the sea witch to help you so you won't die," they told her. The witch gave us this knife. You must plunge it into the heart of the prince. When his blood hits your feet, you will become a mermaid again. Hurry, see the streaks of red in the sky? The sun will rise very soon." They gave the little mermaid the knife. She went to the prince's room and saw the prince and the princess sleeping there. She kissed the prince's brow and looked at the sky, which was getting pinker and lighter all the time. She looked again at the prince, and the knife trembled in her hand. Then she flung it into the sea, where it sunk. The little mermaid threw herself into the sea as the sun rose, and thought she felt herself dissolving into foam. Then she realized she was being drawn up into the air, surrounded by hundreds of transparent, beautiful creatures. The little mermaid saw that her body had become just like theirs. "Where am I?" she asked, and realized she had a voice that was like a song. "You are with the daughters of the air," the creatures answered. "A mermaid can only gain an immortal soul if she wins the love of a human being. But a daughter of the air can gain one through her good deeds. After we have striven to do good for 300 years, we gain an immortal soul. You, poor mermaid, have tried with your whole heart to do good. You have suffered and endured, and so you have joined the daughters of the air." The little mermaid looked up at the sun and felt her eyes filling with tears of joy. She saw people on the ship looking for her. Unseen, she kissed the foreheads of the bride and the prince, and then rose into the sky with the daughters of the air. The End. Written by Hans Christian Andersen in 1836, The Little Mermaid was first published in a collection called Fairy Tales Told for Children in 1837. The story remains hugely popular, with adaptations created for theatre, ballet, and film. Hans Christian Andersen originally created the story with a much sadder ending, with the Little Mermaid dissolving away into foam. However, Andersen claimed that the working title of the story was The Daughter of the Air, and that the ending where the Little Mermaid is transformed was intended from the start. This gives the Little Mermaid more control over her own destiny, instead of relying on the love of another. Andersen later revisited the ending to make it more realistic. In the final version, Andersen later revisited the ending to make it more moralistic. In the final version, whenever a child is good, a year is taken off the 300 years that the daughters of the air must wait to receive their immortal soul. However, children's bad behavior makes the daughters of the air cry, which adds a day to their wait for every tear shed. The story of the Little Mermaid is so popular that a small statue of the mermaid perched on a rock in Copenhagen Harbour is one of Denmark's major tourist attractions.